Welcome to the Story Selling Podcast, the show that explores the art and science of authentic marketing for purpose-led entrepreneurs. With me, your host and founder of the Story Selling Lab, Rob Drummond. I've now been involved in business for long enough to realise that the things I really remember and the things that I cling on to probably hold true. One of my earliest mentors was Perry Marshall. Something Perry talks about is that everybody needs at least one consistent source of leads. That source of leads could be digital, it could be paid advertising, it could be SEO, it could be referrals, it could be going to a networking group. It might be an analog source of leads, but everyone needs one consistent source of leads. And I was thinking about this recently, talking to a client who expressed the opinion that a really good benchmark to aim for, a really good milestone, if you like, if you're just setting out in your marketing, a great milestone to aim for is generating one lead a day. One good lead a day that doesn't immediately unsubscribe. One lead a day that does actually stay subscribed to your emails, opens your emails, engages your emails. Some of those leads then respond to your emails, because you can start to build up a rough model, a rough internal vision of how many leads do you need to generate in order to generate one sales call. Then how many sales calls do you need to be on to generate one client? So therefore, what's the cost in terms of time or money of generating a new client? I've come to the assessment recently that I kind of believe everyone should have an element of paid advertising as part of their marketing strategy. And the reason for that is not only because it provides a relatively instant source of leads, also because it forces you to pay attention to your metrics. It forces you to pay attention to the economics of what you're doing. It forces you to follow up with those leads. If you're paying for the leads, you're much more likely to follow up with them in a consistent way. But it also teaches you things about your market. You get to learn what ads people respond to, what messaging they respond to. You can apply the learnings from your paid advertising to other marketing formats. So today's episode is going to talk about what I call the big three of if you're going to advertise somewhere using a paid advertising approach, what are the main places to look at? And the big three are Google, Facebook, and LinkedIn. Over the next few episodes of the Story Selling Podcast, we're really going to dive into LinkedIn as a platform to look at more seriously for paid lead generation. But before we do that on this episode, I just want to take a step back and assess, of the big three, which one should you make your primary focus? Because that's what you need to determine at the outset. So let's go ahead and have a look at each one in turn. For anyone listening who knows my story, my initial business was as a Google Ads consultant. I ran a small Google AdWords agency, AdWords as it was called then. I've managed a lot of ad spend on Google over the years. And I think that if there is an active search market for what you do, if people go to Google, somebody has the problem that you solve, and their first instinct is to go to Google and search for providers of solutions to that problem. If there is a big market of people doing those searches, then Google probably is your platform of choice, the place to start with. And the reason that Google is the place to start is because if there are people searching, those people are closest to making a buying decision. They're already aware of the problem. They've acknowledged the problem, and they've condensed that acknowledgement into a search term on Google. Because no one goes to Google for fun. Unlike social media, no one goes to connect with people or to see what other people are posting. People are specifically there because something has driven them to be there. So by that virtue, those people are much closer to becoming clients of yours if you can reach them with the right offer and the right message. A lot of the clients that I work with don't have enough of an active search market. And my business is quite a good example of that. So my core thing is LinkedIn ads and email marketing. And yes, there are people searching for LinkedIn ads agencies, email marketing agencies. But really, what I do is I tie the two together using storytelling. And I have to communicate that over a little bit of time to people after they've opted into my world. So I in effect sell people what they need, but what people need is often a little bit different to what they want. And your ads in the first instance can only speak to people about what they want. And what they want isn't what they're not searching on Google for what I do yet, because that isn't their current level of awareness. So for me in my business, I do some select advertising on Google. I have a couple of keywords that I bid on, but it's not a big part of my approach. There's only a small number of keywords where if someone in the UK searches for that exact term, I know that they are probably a good fit for what I do. But there's just not that many searches. I can't get to having one lead a day by just focusing on Google. So I need another primary source. Which brings us on to social media. So if your market is more of a waiting market rather than an active buying market, if the point at which you reach out to people, the point at which they enter your world, if they're not currently in buying mode, then social media is the place to build that list of people. And more reasons to consider social media as your platform of choice are because you can be more specific about who it is that you're attracting. With a Google search, you can't always tell. I mean, you can narrow down the campaigns by demographics, by age, things like that. Sometimes by homeowner status, but you can't, like for instance on Facebook, you can't narrow to people who have very specific interests. You can't narrow to people who have certain job roles, like you can on LinkedIn, or for people who work at specific companies or companies of a specific company size. So the next platform that I want to examine in detail is LinkedIn. So for most of my clients, LinkedIn is the primary pool, if you like, the primary place that they can go and advertise to attract new people into their world. And it's because LinkedIn really caters very well to B2B, often service based businesses where you sell based on expertise. You have an expertise based service. People come to you because you can provide a specific outcome or transformation. But often the point at which people first become aware of you is a little far removed from the point at which they're ready to jump on a sales call with you. And actually, what you're doing in your marketing is you're building a bigger pool of potential future clients. But you need to be sure that those people in that pool are the right people. They need to be working at the right type of company. They need to be working at companies in specific niches or specific verticals. They need to have certain job titles. They need to have certain job functions. So LinkedIn, I think, offers an unparalleled way of setting specific targeting criteria for who you want to attract into your world. They're not going to be ready to buy yet, which is why you need a follow-up system for nurturing those contacts and educating them. But if you sell B2B, if you have a relatively large waiting market of people who might be interested in your services one day, even if they're not looking right now, they're not going to Google and searching right now, but they do need what you do. They just haven't realized it yet. Then LinkedIn is probably the place to focus. Let's move on and look at Facebook. So Facebook, or Meta as it's now called, I think I may be wrong on this, but I think it used to be a bigger advertising player than it maybe currently is. I would go to Facebook as my primary source of leads if I was selling B2C, so direct to consumer, and the waiting market was bigger than the current active buying market. So again, people aren't searching on Google necessarily for exactly what you do, but they might buy in the future. So if I was selling swimming pools, I might target people who are interested in swimming, but they're not searching for a swimming pool right now. You're going to have to target them by house owner or homeowner status. You might target them by income level. So you want to be sure on who they are, but they're not necessarily, the number of people searching for swimming pools in the UK is probably quite small. So therefore, Facebook becomes your primary advertising platform. So I think Facebook is still very good for anyone in, I'm going to call it hobby related businesses. And a hobby business doesn't have to be a small business, as we just talked about with swimming pools. But if you cater to someone's hobby, and that could be swimming, or if you cater to someone's interests, swimming, golf, things that they pursue in their spare time. If you're disseminating ideas, even then, you want to target people based on their interests. Then Facebook might still be the primary platform. So those are the big three: Google, LinkedIn, and Facebook. And I think at this point, the outcome of this listening to this episode is you want to pick one that you're going to focus on as your primary advertising platform. Another reason to focus on one is because if you're managing this yourself, managing multiple platforms is doable, but it becomes more complicated. It becomes more time consuming. You've really got to know what you're doing. So, unless you're a professional ads manager, then it perhaps does make sense to just have one source of leads that you really focus on, you pay attention to. You might have quite a simple campaign structure. You just have a few campaigns that you're running at any given time. You just have one lead magnet, one offer, one front door into the business that you've tested quite carefully. You might test a few different offers, a few different front doors, but the simplest way of getting into one consistent lead a day is having one traffic source, one offer, one follow-up sequence or system. That's much easier to get your head around, because then you can measure. It's much easier to keep track of what's going on in terms of how many contacts do you have at each point. If you've got multiple threads, multiple ways that people can opt in, you got to keep track of all of that in order to know what's working, in order to know, is it worth you spending more on certain campaigns? And budgeting is something we'll cover in a future episode. But your outcome from this episode is to pick one of those platforms. As a quick recap, then, everybody needs one consistent source of leads. And that could be a digital source of leads. It could be an analog source of leads if you meet people face to face. It could be a paid source of leads. It could be a free source of leads. And I use free in air quotes because there's no such thing really as a free lunch. If you're getting free leads, you're probably spending a lot of time creating content or putting out value first in order to attract those free leads. But everybody needs one source of leads. And if you neglect to generate leads on an ongoing basis, because you get busy, because you're booked up, then there'll become a time where, a few clients leave and all of a sudden you end up scrabbling for clients. And at that point, it's too late. You can't then go and plant the seeds in order to generate more work, because for most people listening to this show, it takes time between somebody opting into your world and encountering you for the first time, learning to trust you, learning how your process can really help them. It just takes a bit of time. So you always need to be pushing the marketing flywheel, because if you stop pushing it, if you stop generating leads, then you end up in a bit of a sticky situation where you do need to go and shake the money tree and generate some new clients in a hurry. So I think everybody should have a paid element in their lead generation approach, because paying for leads forces you to measure your results and build a follow-up system that actually works. And the big three places that you can buy leads are Google, LinkedIn, and Facebook. And we've explored on this episode. If you're going to pick one, focus your efforts in one place, which one do you start with? That's what we've covered on this episode. So identify your one source. The next thing you're then going to do is, once you've identified your one platform that you're going to focus on, you're going to set a testing budget, a budget that you're comfortable experimenting with while you find an audience that works, while you learn how to target the right people, and while you learn how to put an offer in front of them that they will respond to. You don't want to break the bank in the meantime. You don't want to take bread off the table. You definitely don't want to gamble. But you do need to set an appropriate budget that's going to allow you to test different ideas and give you the learnings you need to develop your paid advertising approach. So that's what we'll talk about in the next episode, is how to determine that testing budget, and then when to expand your budget once you've proven the use case by generating some leads. Thanks for listening to this episode, and I will speak to you next time. If you've enjoyed this episode of the Story Selling Podcast, you'll want to make sure you're on my email list. Head to storyselling.biz/podcast, where you can opt in to future episode notifications and also download my Lead Incubator Blueprint. You can also find my book, Simple Story Selling, on Amazon in paperback and Kindle formats. Thank you for listening, and I'll speak to you next time.